Today, we're back in Galesburg, Illinois, and right as I arrived at the tracks, a massive yard movement was pulling out onto the main line. Pretty soon, the train started to reverse back into the yard. As it was coming back, several neat hoppers came into view, like this cut of Redding and Northern coal cars. As well as a faded Santa Fe and Burlington Northern hopper. And to top it all off, we see a Union Pacific 3-bay hopper. I've been told the ones with large liveries like this are rather uncommon. After a whole lot of backing up, we finally see the locomotive, a lone SD40-2. We even get a wave from the engineer. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of these yard movements are. I assume they're either sorting cars or making up outbound trains. Once that train was gone, I decided to seek out a new filming location. Here we are at a Y, where we see one of Amtrak's regional commuters. This train goes between Chicago and Quincy every day. Next up was a coal drag entering the Peoria subdivision. Check out how much the engines pitch forward as they take the steep grade downward. I don't think the Peoria sub is a very busy track. I was out here for hours, and this coal drag is the only train I ever saw take the interchange onto the sub, and no other train came off it either. After a few minutes, the rear DPU crossed the road, setting the awaiting cars free. There was none when the train first came. Now there's about 7. A little bit later, we see the same SD40-2 from earlier, working a different yard movement. This is what these engines do all day, every day, going back and forth shuffling rail cars between tracks. While the train was coming to a stop, I noticed that almost all the cars had their air hoses disconnected, which means that all the braking was being done by the single engine. Makes you wonder if these yard movements are tricky for engineers, seeing as how they have thousands of tons worth of momentum that they have to stop while having reduced braking capabilities. Soon enough, it was time to back on up and put these cars where they belong. At the same time the yard job was reversing, a grainer came through on one of the main lines, making for a super neat shot. This must be one heavy grainer if it needs 2 DPUs. Like clockwork, the SD40-2 and its train disappeared back into the yard. About an hour later, a power move came around the bend. We're about to see how the railroad uses a Y to turn locomotives around. This method is much more efficient than using a turntable, which only has room enough for one engine at a time. But with a Y, you can turn around as many engines as you want, so long as the tracks can accommodate them. After pulling ahead of a switch, the power move reversed onto the Y's eastern track. Just like the coal drag, these engines have to take a steep grade in order to come down from the tracks leading into the rail yard. They have to back pretty far up in order to clear the Y's southern switch, but given a few minutes' time, the power move came back on the western track, with all 6 engines now facing the opposite direction. The day's trend of yard jobs continued, with another SD40-2 pulling a rather long cut of cars. Towards the middle of the train was a cut of rather rare IPD boxcars. As they rolled through, I'll put up a photo of what they used to look like in their prime. IPD boxcars were made in the late 70s and early 80s, amidst a boxcar shortage. They were designed to be rolling advertisements for the short lines that owned them, with bright flashy colors and unique liveries. As the yard movement was backing up, Amtrak's Southwest chief was pulling into the station. I was really hoping to get an unobstructed view of this, but seeing it pass behind a moving train is actually more cool than I thought. As the Amtrak moved in, the yard job moved out. After that train left, the eastern side of the tracks became shaded, which means it's a perfect time to go pay a visit to the Galesburg locomotive shops. Our first catch is an SD60M, aptly nicknamed Triclops by Railfans. If you look closely at the nose, you can see a hand-painted number board. We also see some foreign power in the form of a Canadian National Thunder Cab. There was even a General Electric demonstrator unit. This is a Tier 4 GEVO, meaning it has reduced emissions. Railroads use these demonstrator units in the same way you test drive a car. They use them for a bit and see if they like them. If they do, they'll probably buy some for themselves, and if they don't, they just give them back to the manufacturer. Who knows? Maybe we can expect to see Tier 4 GEVOs in BNSF paint someday. After gawking at the advanced modern locomotives, I noticed another SD60 down the line, still in its Cascade green paint. BNSF already has few SD60s, and to see one still in its original colors is quite a treat. There wasn't as much of a variety at the locomotive shops as last time, so I decided to leave, and after driving around a bit, I stumbled across this gargantuan snowplow. This sucker's old too, 72 years old to be exact. The build plate reads March in 1950. This thing's been stationary for so long that animals were starting to call it home. Here we see a bird's nest made right on the frame, and in the coupler there was a wasp nest. That's something you don't see every day. Not too far from the snowplow was a line of storage tracks with some amazing engines parked on them. Here we see a GP30, still sporting its iconic cab and dynamic brake fan housing. The next interesting locomotive was a model I had never seen before, but a quick Google search told me it was a GP9. This thing was old before Santa Fe and BN ever even thought about merging, and it's crazy that BNSF is still holding on to this old relic. As fate would have it, this bluebonnet was hooked up nose to nose with not one, but two Santa Fe war bonnets. Faded as always, but still looking good. At the head of all the stored engines was the icing on the cake, a wide cab Dash 8, wearing an H3 paint scheme. It's a shame these ain't used as road engines anymore, but it's probably for the better. And besides, if you saw them on the main line all the time, they wouldn't be as special. After seeing just about everything there was, I decided to call it a day. Thanks for watching. If y'all enjoyed this video, consider checking out some other ones of mine. Till next time.